Welcome, Rob. It's such a pleasure to see you.
It is really nice to be here with you. Thanks, Ray. It's great. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you all for joining us in interviews. Interviews is a series of interviews that I've been doing with people that are experts in spiritual practices or have many years of spiritual practices. And the idea is to ask them how these spiritual practices have deepened their everyday life, how they've been informed. So today I have with me a very special guest, my own brother-in-law, Rob Patzig, who is the president of Lake Mincha International, which is essentially is the Yang Drung Bon tradition of Tibet. And this is perhaps one of the oldest, if not the oldest surviving spiritual tradition in the world. So welcome once again, Rob. I'm honored and I'm happy to continue conversations we have, but now with us today with guests. So please tell us more about Bon and what it is in the world and how it's been.
Yeah. First, thanks, Ray. It's really just nice to be online with you, and I love talking about this tradition. Um, it was something that I had never heard of until 2008, when it turned out that there was a retreat center in this tradition 2 hours away from my house, and it had been there for 15 years, and I'd never heard of it. And I thought, I should check it out. And so it turns out that that is one of Ligmincha's. We have two in Mexico, two in the US, and one in Poland. And the founder of Ligmincha is Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, who grew up in a monastery in India, but in a Tibetan community in exile. And Menri is now the largest Tibetan Bön monastery outside of Tibet. And the tradition came out of Tibet during the Chinese occupation in the 50s, like all the other traditions came to the West at that time. And what's interesting, well, there's so many interesting things to me about Bön, but it's the indigenous tradition of Tibet. So it was there before Buddhism came to Tibet in the 700s. And it self-reports that it was founded by Tonpa Shenrab, who came to Tibet like 16,000 and about 16,050 years ago. So, and that, that's self-reported and it's an oral tradition. So, there aren't archaeological records or written documents like that, but that's how the tradition considers itself. And what came to Tibet was that at most spiritual practice was animal sacrifice, blood rituals and things like that. The murder, the sacrifice of animals. So that was where Yunrin Bun came from. And within the tradition, there are 9 paths within the tradition, and they go from like the first path is Tibetan medicine. There are shamanic practices. There are tantric practices. There are practices called Dzogchen, which are resting in the nature of mind, but they all come from this deep respect for the living world. And so, while I don't think you would find a Bunpo call their practices shamanic because it's not a word the Tibetans really have, there are clear kind of overlaps between what you teach and what you've been studying for many, many years, and what's going on in this tradition. And I think one of the main ones is the way we look at the elements, which I know is a really big piece of what you teach too.
Absolutely, yeah. As Mother Earth and the elements that she's provided for us to make our body or to give us nourishment. So I guess this is one of the most ancient studies of the elements and how they look at it, like a science of what are we made of or what the world is. Is that how they approach it?
The natural world is made out of 5 qualities that we really see that are form everything that is. There's space, and then nothing exists outside of space. And then there's the air element, which fills space, and it provides the dynamic energy of movement inside of space. And then fire comes from the friction of that air moving and creates the warmth and creates the power to manifest in particular beings and trees and people and rocks and mountains and rivers. And is the creative energy of life. And then the water element is the cohesiveness of the natural world. And then underlying all of that is the earth element itself. And the earth is really the foundation for our world and our plane of existence. But, there are many, many other kinds of beings that their foundation might be water or might be air or might be, fire. It just happens that the way we see the world, the foundation is the earth element.
Beautiful. And you said, you mentioned earlier that when you go back 16,500 years ago, a big part of the tradition or ceremony rather was animal sacrifice. Uh,
Right.
I imagine that that's not still happening, especially in your
No,
in
definitely not. It's,
recent.
yeah, it was a total transformation. And, and Bun has changed. It's not what you see today is not what you would see 16,000 years ago. The teachings continued to expand. There were commentaries on teachings. Other great teachers came, other enlightened beings came. And, and then in the 700s, Buddhism came to Tibet, and Bun really adopted a great deal of the Buddhist practices so that if you're not familiar with the differences, Bun looks very much like Buddhism, in Tibetan Buddhism. The rituals look very much the same. The names of the deities are different. Some of the gestures are different, but the prayers are very similar sometimes. So there's a lot of commonality. And yeah, it's a very peaceful religion, built fundamentally on respect for all of life, for all living things, not just for human beings, not just for our welfare, but what they call the great compassion, the bodhicitta, which is that deep wish for all life of all kinds, whether it's, you know, our pets or family members, our enemies, cows, sheep, pigs, immaterial beings that we can't see, all of it. And so our goal for practice is to harmonize ourselves by balancing our own energies, by balancing our own elements. And then being able to, by being in that place of balance, I kind of am able to rest in my own natural goodness, as opposed to being caught up in my selfishness or my ego and my pride and my attachment to how things are going to go. That I'm in that sort of that natural open space, and then I'm actually able to benefit myself by making good choices for my own life and be in a good space. But then I can also help and be of a service to other people and other beings as well. And the elements is fundamental to being able to do that. When you aren't connected to the earth, like when you're not grounded, you can't really accomplish anything. You float from this to that, your emotions are here and there, and nothing really happens. But if you have too much earth and you don't have enough flow, you don't have enough fire in your life, you don't have enough air moving you, you're stuck and you can't do anything either. And so it's really about that balance. And that's one of the things I've enjoyed when Eileen and I have gotten to participate with some of your rituals and some of your ceremony, is that opening sacred space and really paying attention, not just to the five, the six directions in the center, but really being connected to the elements in the natural world and in ourselves. I think we have that in common.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that from what we've discussed and from what I'm hearing you say now, it's like Bond is really shamanic in the essence that is one of the most, if not the most ancient science or study on reality, on what's happening outside us and on the human species, on our psychology, our physiology, how we feel, how we act, how we interact with others, right?